If you know who I am, you might know about me through my blog. I started a blog in 2004 that became very, very popular. So much so popular that it kind of started dwarfing my regular work. And I had this ball of energy. I was trying to figure out, like, what do I do with all these people that are paying attention to my blog? I wanted to do something. I wanted to build something, because that's what we do. We build stuff, right? So I contacted a bunch of people online that I respected. One of them was Joel Spolsky. And he had a really great idea. There was this site called Experts Exchange with a dash in it, and you have to be careful how you spell it. And he said, it's a great site, but it has a terrible experience, and I think we could build something like that, but like of the community that did it better for developers with developers. And so this is essentially more or less the design document that became Stack Overflow. We wanted to take concepts from things we knew that were working, like wikis. We love that wikis could be updated. I love the ownership of a blog where it's like, okay, I'm the author and I will write an article. I love the upvoting mechanics on Dig and Reddit that got good information to the top. And then this sort of back and forth discussion thing of figuring problems out that I would see on forums. So he's kind of smashed all of this together into a Frankenstein, and we came up with Stack Overflow, which I'm sure you're probably familiar with. Since I left Stack Overflow, they actually have a great tutorial that's linked at the top there that sort of explains what Stack Overflow is for people that haven't seen it before. And it walks you through. And one of the first things it says to you, this is the first page of the tutorial, is, this is all about getting answers. This is about Q&A. And it took us a little while to figure that out, because initially we thought, okay, this is a place where you kind of discuss programming problems. But we found that the discussions were kind of harming the getting of answers. People were more interested in the discussions than they were actually getting the answers. So we had to be really strict about that and say, look, no, there's a question, and then you attempt to answer the question. Now, if you need to clarify the question, you can, but it's really about this Q&A. And it's a very developer-centric site. Everything about Stack Overflow was built from first principles around what I knew about developers, like sort of how their minds work, how my mind worked, and how you get people to be, work together to find an answer. So there was this reputation system which came from peer acceptance. Like if another programmer saw that you gave a good answer that was helpful, that person would upvote it, and that would contribute to your reputation. So it's peer acceptance of answers. And that is a number that's next to your name that represents sort of your peer acceptance of the answers that you've given on the site. We also have a badging system. In addition to the reputation system, there's a badge system. To me, this is like how you learn software. Rather than give people a manual, you sort of present a menu of like things you could try to learn, and you get badges. And it's very much similar to Boy Scout and Girl Scout badges, where it's like, oh, cool, here's some things that I'm interested in that I've tried on the site, and I get these badges as a result of experimenting and trying things on the site. And it's also, the entire structure of Stack Overflow is about highlighting sort of your best work and putting your best foot forward. So if you go to your profile page on Stack Overflow, you'll notice that there's some ambient sorting that goes on here about, oh, these are my answers that got the most upvotes, that were the most helpful to other people in the world. Here's the questions that were the most helpful, and sort of where your reputation is coming from, what tags you participate in. It's all about how you're contributing back and helping other people learn and helping yourself learn along the way. And this actually extends across the entire network. Stack Overflow is a network of sites. It was working so well that we said, wow, this mousetrap that we've built is very effective, so let's try it with some other topics. And we kind of extended the engine outward to see where it could go as a Q&A engine, and that's where you're seeing accounts there. So what we ended up building was kind of a very, very complicated game that was designed to get a very specific result, really good questions and really good answers. And it's kind of a strict system, but these kind of games are very familiar to developers. We work with, this state machine, the computer, that's constantly, iterating through its set of rules and reaching decisions that can sometimes be very arbitrary, but this is very native to us as developers. Like, we expect this kind of environment, a machine that, given a set of rules, produces a set of outputs. So Stack Overflow kind of reflects that design, right? It's also a system of rules, like a program that's designed to get behavior from people, right? So essentially you're programming the people at that point. It's kind of a meta programming. But I'm very comfortable with this because when I started as a programmer, I started by typing in these games from these books, right? Basic, right? So you would type in the game, which was excruciating, of course. You had to type in every character. And then you would play the game, and then you realize, hey, I can change the game, right? Like, I typed it in, and now I have a game, whatever it is, like these old classic games like Hunt the Wumpus. And you can change the game. You can make it do whatever you want it to do, right? Which is I mean, that's super fun, right? You're in control. And here's an 8-bit representation of Hunt the Wumpus. It's these directed graphs, and it doesn't actually sound that fun, and probably isn't that fun in retrospect, but at the time it seemed really cool. And this extends now with stuff like Minecraft, which I still think it's very funny that this ended up with Microsoft because it's Java, right? But it's cool because it's kids learning to program. Really, it is. This is probably the most powerful tool we have for teaching kids how to program is basically Minecraft, because they want to do stuff in the game and like, wow, I can change the game. I can make the game do what I want it to do, right? So that's exciting, and I think that's the reflection of what we're trying to do with Stack Overflow is create this kind of collaborative game where we're learning stuff together. And games, the best games are really about learning, and the game is just there to give you a structure so you work towards collaborative goals that make sense. And it's supposed to be fun, right? Like that's what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be having fun. So it puts the emphasis on that. Now, Stack Overflow as a game was also turned out to be addictive, which wasn't really the intent. So we had to put in some systems. There's this thing called the daily reputation cap, which means you can only get a certain amount of reputation per day, and then it's like, okay, we'll just go, do something else, do actual work, and then come back to Stack Overflow tomorrow, right? So you have to be careful. These games can have dark sides, like, if you don't think through what you're doing. But that was really much the structure. So that was my life from, we started that in 2008, and I was there until 2012. And again, it's very, very structured. It's a very strict system, which we get a lot of pushback on because people come to Stack Overflow and like, well, I just want to type words into a box. And we're like, well, that's not really what we do at Stack Overflow, right? There's a purpose to what you're doing here. You're trying to accomplish something. You're trying to move software development forward, and the way you do that is by producing a good repro of whatever problem it is you're having, or explain the problem to us in a way that we can understand and get excited about your problem, right? It's a really interesting problem that we would love to help you solve. And that's how you learn. You learn by teaching, right? You're teaching some of the time and you're learning some of the other time. And because this is the All Things Open conference, I do want to note that from the very beginning, all the information that's in Stack Overflow is Creative Commons. So you can actually download the entire corpus of not just Stack Overflow, but actually all the Stack Exchange sites. If you want to do data analysis or just want to have the data, or you think it's cool to have a copy of Stack Overflow on your laptop, I don't know, you can do this. So it's at archive.org, which is a great resource. But Stack Overflow itself is not open source. So at this point in my life, some stuff started happening to me. So as I was developing Stack Overflow, I was like, what do I do? What's my job? What am I doing with my life, right? And I realized, like, I build massively multiplayer games for you, basically, right? And we do it together. I don't mean like I dictate the rules. Like, we do it together. We're building this game that we're playing together. And then, so in 2009, this happened to me. And then in 2012, this happened to me. And you kind of don't want this to happen to you, just for the record. 2 babies is a lot of babies. That's a lot of babies, right? They're very sweet girls, very sweet girls. So at this point in my life, I'm getting like a crash course in like empathy. Not that I wasn't necessarily empathetic before, but I love the computer, right? And the computer is just a machine. You tell it what to do. It does exactly what you tell it to do, even if you didn't actually want it to do that thing. And it just marches forward mindlessly on its little task, right? But kids don't work that way, right? So I had to learn a lot about sort of human beings at this point. And this book, How to Talk So Kids Will Listen, is such a fantastic book. If you're ever a parent or just want to interact with humans better, this is such an amazing, amazing book. Because what they don't tell you about having kids is like your kids are going to be freaking out like a lot of the time. And like I was not ready. I was not ready for this level of freak out in my life, man. So that's something I had to learn about. So this is a blog entry that someone wrote, and he actually wrote a book. It's really, really funny, but this is unbelievably true. Before I left on this trip, I have my son is 8 years old, and my daughters are 5 years old. I was taking a shower because I'm hurrying. I had to take an overnight flight to get here, and I'm in the shower, and my son's crying outside the door, outside the shower, as I'm showering. I'm like, Henry, what is wrong? Like, I'm trying to take a shower. I got to go. He's like, my cheeseburger had ketchup on it, and oh, God, it was just, he couldn't. So here I am, like a good dad, like I'm wiping the ketchup off his hamburger, like I'm digging the ketchup out of the bun. Like, here you go, Henry, I'll fix it for you, right? So this is kind of your life. And the thing that's weird about this, and this is so important in this talk, if you get one thing out of this talk, it's like not everything is a problem to be fixed. Because when you're an engineer, when you're a software developer, your idea is like, we fix problems, right? We got in the world, it's like, oh, look, a problem, I shall solve that problem, right? Well, kids do not work that way, right? Like, solving the problem doesn't actually work, which is so counterintuitive to me as a person. Like, like, say we're out of cereal, it's like, well, we're out of cereal, you know? Like, that's just the answer. It's like, well, we're out of cereal. It's like, they don't really want to hear that. What they want to hear is that, I'm really sorry we're out of cereal. I wish we had that cereal. If I had a magical cart, I would fly and get you that cereal, right? It's not really about fixing the problem. It's about empathy. There's a really cool video. I can't show it to you because I don't have time. It's called It's Not About the Nail, It's Hilarious. It kind of illustrates that this is a problem for adults as well. That this idea that, you know, not everything is a problem to be solved, and not everything can be solved. There's a lot of social problems that I can't solve, I don't know how to solve. So that was kind of a challenge for me, but it led directly into my next project where I like video games, and I like playing video games, but I noticed I had been on this forum for a long time, and I noticed, gosh, it's actually more fun to be on the forum than play the games longer term. I was like, well, that's weird, right? So the forum game was actually more reliable fun for me than the actual video games, right? That kind of came and went, but when I was on the forum, I was like, gosh, this is a great game, right? Which leads me to Discourse. So Discourse is an open source project. It's open source discussion software. And when I initially started, I was like, oh, it's kind of be like, you know, we had this great word Discourse I was able to get the domain name for and register. And it does represent what we're trying to do. But it's also kind of fancy. It's like, oh, is this a debate club? And quickly on, I realized that, you know, fun is kind of an essential ingredient to discussion systems. Now on Stack Overflow, we tolerate fun, but you know, it's not really about that. It's about like getting stuff done, right? It's not wrong to have fun, but that's not the purpose of what we're doing there. Whereas discussions really are overtly about, am I enjoying this? Am I having a good time, you know? And it could be, you know, a dinner party. It could be more overtly a party. And I had actually written a blog entry about this. I had to like go on record saying, like, there's too many fun questions. You guys need to chill out with the fun questions because they're kind of not working in our system. Because other developers didn't like it when you got reputation for posting a joke. And this actually makes sense if you think about it, because a joke, you know, unless you wrote the joke and you're the author joke, it's someone else's work, right? It's not really even your work. And it's just because it's funny. It's not, you know, about a problem that was solved. So we had to map through all that with Stack Overflow. And when I came back to Discourse, it was interesting to sort of embrace that fun aspect of the site and say, yeah, we're actually here to have a good time. We're not actually necessarily here to do a ton of work. So where we see this is a Discourse community, and you notice there's a games category. Like when they launched the site, this is our first beta site, one of the categories was games, and they started playing these really complicated forum games all by themselves. Like they sort of adapted to this new reality and were saying, hey, yeah, we are here to have fun. Let's have fun with each other. But it's not all fun. I do want to emphasize, like, one of the things I love about Discourse and one of the things I love about online discussion is that you're sort of synthesizing a story that explains what's happening to you, which on some level is unexplainable. A lot of stuff that happens in life, we don't know why it happens. We don't know how it happens, and it can be very frustrating. So this book, 59 Seconds, also another excellent book. I highly recommend it to really anyone. They were trying to do some research to figure out, like, how do you deal with negative experiences? Like, what's a good way to handle a negative experience? Should you talk about it? Should you write about it? And they did a little bit of research, and they had two groups. And one group wrote about it, and one group sort of just talked to people about it. And the group that wrote about their negative experience had a much better outcome. They felt better about this thing that had happened to them, and they felt like they had worked through it. Because when you write it down, you're creating a narrative around this thing that happened to you. And that narrative becomes part of your story. You contextualize what's happening to you. And you actually are able to explain it and rationalize it in a way that makes sense, right? You told a story, right? Which is one of the most timeless things we can do as human beings, like, just tell me a story, right? And it has to be your story. Don't tell me someone else's story. Don't tell me a movie you saw. Tell me about you. Tell me about stuff that happened to you, because that's real. That's what we're here for. So another interesting thing that happened to us, we had an early customer that their site was just exploding. Like, it was unbelievably popular to the point we had to like charge them more money basically and talk to them about like moving up to bigger tiers and all that good stuff. And I was like, what do these people even do? So I went to their site and I looked at it and I realized what they do is interactive fiction. So like, they're in the business of storytelling, like literally, right? So no wonder they loved Discourse, because they already got it, right? They sell these stories where you make multiple choices and then you go through the narrative, and it's very much like one of my favorite things, the Choose Your Own Adventure books, which to me, these are early programmer books, right? Making choices, doing jumps, going back to see what other choices you could have made. So open source. So Stack Overflow, as I mentioned, was not open source. And one of the reasons it couldn't be open source is because Stack is a very strict tool. It's designed for, when we launched it, it said like professional developers or enthusiasts, right? We did not say, bring us people who don't know how to program and we will teach them how to program. That was never the intent of Stack Overflow. It was about people who knew how to program but wanted to get better at it, right? So it was about improving or like, sharpening your skills, right? And it's also, very targeted at what it does. So when we gave people Stack, they would actually hurt themselves with it. Like if you gave a kid a scalpel, right? This is kind of a dangerous thing to do because it's a tool for surgeons. It's a tool for people who need to cut very precisely. So that was frustrating to me. So when we built Discourse, I wanted to build it in such a way that I could give it to you and you would not hurt yourself. Any particular situation where you're like, hey, I need a community, I need people to work together, Discourse is an appropriate solution in a way that Stack Overflow is not at all, because first of all, there's downvoting in Stack Overflow. Like you can actually say that doesn't work for me and I don't like that solution. And people don't like that, right? It's not a great feeling to be downvoted, but it's there for a reason. So in Discourse, there's no concept of downvoting. So I can give it to you as a general building block of community, and you're not gonna hurt yourself, you're gonna have a good experience. And you can use a table knife to like open a box. You could use a table knife to, of course, cut your food. There's a lot of different scenarios where it's useful. And it is, of course, completely open source. I feel that communities have to be open source because when you build a community, it's a trust relationship, right? Like, I can't take this software away from you. If you go and build a community on Discourse and it becomes very popular, I can't then say, oh, now you owe us $5,000 a month. Or goodbye to your community. I think this trust relationship is so essential to building community that when I started Discourse, the only option was open source. That's the only way that I think you can build sustainable community is on a platform that you own together, right? Like, we build Discourse. We have 20 people at Discourse now, but you can help us build Discourse. You can suggest things for Discourse. You can build plugins for Discourse, all this stuff. Our spirit animal was WordPress. Like, I really liked what WordPress did, and I wanted to emulate it to some degree. So github.com/discourse, the complete project, and pretty much all the plugins are there. So comparing these two things. So in Stack Overflow, it was about being civil, it was about useful information, and practical problems that you actually face as sort of a developer in your daily life. And of course, the data was Creative Commons. So Discourse, on the other hand, it's about empathy. It's about listening to other people and just sort of hearing their experience and feeling their experience and sharing those stories, and hearing the story of what's happening to these people. And it is completely, fully open source. So then the final question I got to was like, okay, I realized in 2012 I build massively multiplayer games for developers. But I was like, is that all I do? So recently I was approached by the publishers of DK. I've actually bought some of these books for my kids. And they said, hey, we want you to do a little interview for kids about programming. And I was like, okay, cool, I recognize the series, I'll do that. And I did this, and then I completely forgot about it for months, because book publishing takes a while. It's a great book, actually, came out really nice. So then I went back when I got the printed copy finally, and I read my interview, and I was like, what did I even say to these questions? I don't remember. It was an interview for kids. I didn't spend a ton of time on it. And I realized I had actually encapsulated the thing that was most important to me in this interview was that the reason we build software, right? Like, why do we build software? You know, is it because of algorithmic purity? Is it about, you know, the feeling of building things? And I realized, no, to me, software is about building things that helps people be better versions of themselves. And I'm starting with me, right? Like, I want to be a better version of me. So that's what we do, and that's what I hope you guys can take away from this, is like, we build open source software that encourages us to be our better selves. And that's the point of Discourse, that's the point of Stack Overflow, and all the things that I've worked on. So that's all I have for you. Thanks. Thank you.